Good evening, students. This unit, we will begin a study of the genetic code heredity. In this presentation, we will learn mostly about how genetics work, what it is, and why it makes us who we are. Our learning goals and objectives for this particular presentation is to describe the basic of the genetic code, and hopefully you will have a better understanding by the end of this presentation. We will give examples of major mechanisms of inheritance and discuss what inheritance is. We will discuss the nature of inheritance of specific genetic diseases such as PKU, sickle cell disease, and Huntington's disease, and we'll also talk about hemophilia. We're going to discuss and define mutations and its implication in genetics. And we'll talk about various chromosome abnormalities. What is genetics? It is the study of how different qualities called traits that are passed down from the parent to the child. We get our traits and characteristics from each of our parents. It also helps explain why you are such a unique individual and why you look like your family members and why certain diseases run in families. And we also talk about DNA. When you trace the past of these qualities, we are following packages of information called genes. Genes are also called alleles, and you will hear me refer to genes as alleles throughout this presentation. And they are segments of DNA that function as hereditary units. And here in this illustration, you see a replication of the DNA molecule. Now, how are our genes structured? Well, as you know, our body is made of many tiny cells. The cell is called a soma. And in each cell is the nucleus. And the nucleus is where our DNA is located, our genes, our chromosomes. And the structure here, the relationship between the chromosomes, the DNA, and genes, well, the chromosomes contains the DNA. So it's on the chromosomes. Genes are sequences of DNA nucleotides, this long strand with all of the protein alleles and amino acids that you learned about in biology. Genes are located on the chromosomes. Genes consist of DNA, and we have 23 pairs of chromosomes, which we will learn about how they divide in meiosis and mitosis. Now, what is the process of meiosis? Well, in meiosis, we have a parent cell here. Chromosomes replicate, begins making copies of each chromosome are duplicated, and then they're swapped. And once they all of the pairs of the chromosomes divide, they form two cells, and then the cells divide again into other cells. Replication finishes, and the plasma membrane, which is this outer portion of the cell that protects the cell, it forms and it protects it, and then the end product are two daughter cell units. Okay, each daughter cell unit has the same number of chromosomes, one like the other. Now, in the process of mitosis, we also begin with one cell, and it makes a copy of the cells, and of course, the original cell divides. It divides into daughter cells, and each of these cells divide again, and the end results are two daughter cells with the same amount of chromatin material, same number of 23 pairs of chromosomes in each cell from mom and from dad. Now, let's talk about who determines the sex of the child. Male versus female. Well, we know that the mother's ovum or egg has only X chromosomes. The father's sperm carries an X or a Y chromosome. And it is the father who determines the gender or the sex of the child. And if an egg with one of its X chromosome is fertilized by one of the sperm that has a Y chromosome, then the end product is going to be a male. Only a male can have a Y chromosome. Now, if a sperm that has an X chromosome reaches first, the egg and fertilized egg first, then you're going to have two X chromosomes, and of course, you're going to have a female. And then we have 23 pairs of chromosomes from each parent. So it is the male that determines the sex of the child. Now, what is inheritance? Well, inheritance is where we get those traits. Who do we inherit it from? We get our traits and our characteristics from our parents. And so we talk about mechanisms of inheritance. One of the first type that we talk about is a single gene inheritance. And here we talk about a dominant recessive inheritance, which is a pattern of inheritance in which one allele, also called the gene, dominates another so that only its phenotype is expressed. So what is the phenotype? Well, the phenotype is the outward appearance of the individual, the blue eyes, the brown eyes. Then the genotype is the genetic makeup. Who did we get the recessive or the dominant gene from to have blue eyes or brown eyes? And it is the phenotype that is determined by the genotype, which is a result. Now, let's look at this Punnett square. If you remember from high school biology, the dominant trait here for brown eyes is uppercase B. The recessive trait for blue eyes is lowercase b. So, in humans, the allele or gene for the brown eyes, B, is dominant to the blue eyes, B, which is the recessive gene. So a brown-eyed man and a blue-eyed woman have a daughter with brown eyes and a son with blue eyes. So if you see here, anytime if you have two recessive traits, you're going to have the blue eyes. Two dominant traits, you're going to have the brown eyes. So anytime a dominant gene is paired with a recessive gene, it is going to be a dominant trait. Okay. Now, another mechanism of inheritance is a sex-linked characteristic, which is caused by an attribute determined by an X chromosome, which is found only on the X chromosome, found mostly in males. Example, colorblindness. So in this Punnett square, the mother can distinguish reds from greens, but she is a carrier because one of her X chromosomes contain a colorblind gene. So if a boy inherits the recessive colorblindness gene on the X chromosome that his mother provides to him, there's no colorblind gene, so he would be unaffected at that moment. Now, but his mother provides to him. There is no colorblind gene on his Y chromosome, but he could dominate the colorblindness gene. If a girl who inherits the gene is usually has a normal color vision on her other X chromosome that can dominate the colorblindness gene, she would have to inherit two of the recessive genes for colorblindness, one from each parent, as you see in the Punnett square here. And of course, you see here 25%, the genotype ratio, 25% and 25% could be colorblind and no not being colorblind. And the bottom one illustrates a colorblind male, which is unaffected by the father. Here, the mother is a carrier. So remember, colorblindness is a sex-linked inheritance. Now, another type of mechanism of inheritance is a polygenic trait. So poly means more than one characteristic, which is influenced by more than one gene. And some examples of polygenetic inheritance include height, tall, short people in your family, skin color, definitely. Why do we have different skin colors? Maybe you have a grandmother, mother, sister, or aunt or uncle, different skin colors. So you could inherit the trait from either of those. And intelligence is also a polygenic trait, which we'll discuss in your unit on intelligence. Temperaments, where do we get our temperament from? And susceptibility to cancer. And this is why cancer runs in certain families. Maybe someone else in your family had cancer and you inherited that gene. All right. So there are several different genetic abnormalities or diseases, but we will only just highlight a few here. Sickle cell is an abnormal sickling or bow shape of the red blood cells that cause an inefficient distribution of oxygen, and it can cause lots of pain, lots of swelling. It attacks the organs in the body, and of course, they are more susceptible to respiratory disease. And this disease is only found in the African American community. And you can see the normal red blood cells are round, and the sickle cell are the bow shape. And therefore, oxygen cannot get through these cells because they are elongated. All right, PKU, phenylketonuria. This is where a child lacks an enzyme, mostly a protein enzyme, including milk containing the amino acid phenylalanine. And this is found in the DNA strand that we talked about. And it attacks the nervous system, and it makes them very hyper and can cause severe mental retardation. Of course, we can no longer say mental retardation, but intellectual disability, it can really affect them. And in the normal person, you can see everything normal here. And in the person with PKU, you have some of the phenylalanine that are just abnormal. Then we have Huntington's disease. Well, Huntington's disease is where the nervous system deteriorates very rapidly, and it usually happens in middle-aged individuals and associated with dementia or personality changes. So people who you may hear say they have early dementia, maybe they had Huntington's disease and was diagnosed at an early age. And Huntington's disease is irreversible. All of these diseases are irreversible and can really be very harmful to the individual. Hemophilia. Hemophilia is the inability of the blood to clot normally like it's supposed to, and it's more common in males than females, and it is also a sex-linked inheritance gene on the X chromosome. And here you see a healthy normal blood vessel that when the normally when the blood vessel is broken, bleeding stops because your platelets that acts like glue that sticks together and they start to clot and it heals. Now, with a person who has hemophilia, as you can see, when the blood vessel is broken, the platelets don't come together and they don't stick together and they don't clot like they should, and the individual bleeds more than the average individual. And here, as far as the sex links characteristics, your parents, okay, a father with hemophilia has a dominant gene for hemophilia, and then the mother has a hemophilia gene that she is a carrier. So that if the mother is a carrier, then the son will have hemophilia, and the daughter would have hemophilia if the mother is a carrier. The father who has hemophilia, if the father has it, the son may not have hemophilia, and then the daughter would be a carrier for the hemophilia gene, but she would not have hemophilia. Okay? All right. Now, for the mutations. Mutations are small changes that occur in genes. Now, recall that genes are on the chromosome, and there are things that go on inside that cell that we can't see and can't see from birth. So, mutations are unpredictable changes in the structure of the amount of the DNA. Okay? And then most of them occur inside the cell. Inside the cells, and they are not passed from one generation to the next. Only those mutations or small changes which occur in the formation of gametes can be inherited gametes and during the process of meiosis and fertilization. Recall, the mutations occur because of two events that can occur during the formation of egg and sperm cells. If the egg and sperm cells, once it becomes an egg, and if it does not divide correctly, then this is where we have the problem. It's a change in the structure or the arrangement of one or more genes, and they can be beneficial, they can be harmful, and can lead to all of these genetic abnormalities that we just talked about. All right, other chromosome abnormalities are also forms of mutation as well. And so we have Turner syndrome. So, what is Turner syndrome? Well, it's a genetic abnormality that affects females. They're born with two X chromosomes, but females with Turner syndrome are born only with one chromosome or part of a chromosome. Here you see where part of the chromosome is broken out or arm is hanging. And they can cause various cognitive declines and developmental delays as a child grows. Now, Turner's. Now we have uh, fragile X chromosome syndrome, which is a condition that affects the phenotype or the outward appearance, and it can affect them developmentally and cause a lot of behavioral issues. And this is the most common form of mental retardation. The specific gene on the X chromosome makes a protein necessary for brain development. So, if a person has missing part of a chromosome, it can affect their brain development. Down syndrome, which we are more common we're more familiar that we used to call trisomy 21, a part of a regular cell showing chromosomes 18, 19, 20, and 21 pairs. And on that 21st pair, you have an extra chromosome. So part of a Down syndrome child showing chromosome 21 pair with one extra chromosome. And of course, a child who has Down syndrome have various different facial features, wider eyes, the facial features are different. And of course, they develop various developmental delays as well. So this is just an introduction to genetics, and we will discuss more in class. Have questions, write them down, and bring them to class.